Inflation, immigration, gas, Afghanistan, criminal justice. Oh, hey, ladies and gentlemen, we're back with you. We're going to have a little discussion about what's going on in the country. We're going to talk kind of about the gas crisis or lack thereof, inflation, the what's happening in Afghanistan right now, because I do think it bears a discussion based on an agreement that was made with the Taliban before the current administration was in office, and they broke that agreement. And in breaking that agreement, they created more danger for the troops on the ground and the Afghan citizens that are still stuck with it. But let's get started with the pipeline. And as we're getting started, remember to like, subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comments. Share with your friends. If you don't like what I have to say, then go ahead and hit dislike and tell me why in the comments. Moving right on. Okay, so the original discussion about the Colonial Pipeline, it was hacked with ransomware. And if you know what ransomware is, it's historically they've attacked all kind of things, hospitals, education facilities. And what it is, it's like any other computer virus that goes in, but it locks the system so that you can't get into the information. In this case, the ransomware attack led to the pipeline shutting down. Now, to put in perspective, that pipeline carries, and it's here in the article, it carries 100 million gallons of crude products every year to the East Coast. Now, why that's important is think about what's on the East Coast. You have Washington, D.C., you have the D.C. metro area, actually, which encompasses quite a bit. You have 17 states have declared a state of emergency, but you have Department of Homeland Security and the current administration saying it's not a crisis. Although, after spending as many years as I did in Fort Bragg, a lot of my friends retired in the area in North Carolina, Virginia, D.C. Some are still in active duty, others have civilian jobs in that area, and I've talked to a lot of them, and they're telling me, yeah, we're seeing gas lines every day. Some of them are old enough to remember the gas crisis during the Carter administration, and they are starting to make comparisons. One thing I saw, which I've only been able, I'll bring it up because I haven't been able to verify it by more than one source. But in Asheville, North Carolina, 71% of fuel stations are out of fuel. And we talk about the fault of this is the ransomware attack. Now, here's the funny part about the ransomware. Okay, so we talked about the importance of the pipeline. We'll go to the funny part about that, but I'm not going to blame the ransomware attack on the Biden administration because that's unfair. The threat to infrastructure such as pipelines, electric and water facilities has been around for a long time. So if we're going to place blame somewhere, I would actually go all the way back to the last Bush administration, if not the first Bush and Clinton timeframe, when we saw the threats to these areas, and they've done things to harden the systems to make them harder to get into, but it's very expensive, it's very time consuming, and they still haven't done enough. And that can lead to the same thing happening to electrical grids. And people are like, oh, that'll never happen. Well, just think about this. It wasn't ever going to happen with a pipeline, and it did. So what happens when they do it to an electrical grid and you have major cities like New York City or Washington, D.C. or Los Angeles or Boston, and they're without electricity for a full 24 or 48 hours? Think about that. If you look back to the 70s with the rolling blackouts in New York City, every time there was a blackout, there was violence when the lights go out. On top of it, even in suburbia where there won't be as much violence, most people aren't prepared for something like this. If you talk about a power outage that lasts in excess of 4 to 5 hours, because your 6 year old goes, you have no electricity. So if you keep your refrigerator and freezer closed, your food will last for a while. But when your 6 year old goes to get a pudding cup out of the refrigerator, and then your 8 year old goes to get juice, and then your 10 year old goes to get whatever the 10 year old is going to get, and this cold air is let out, well, suddenly the stuff in your refrigerator starts to warm up, then it's going to go bad. That's just one of the many things that happens too. We're a completely interconnected society at this point, and with a lot of electricity, we have no internet. Well, I can use my phone. That's right, but how long is your phone going to last? And how long can you sit in your car charging your phone so that you can use your phone? So the ransomware is at fault for the pipeline being shut down and the fuel shortage. Although the administration and DHS is telling us that the fuel shortage, that there isn't a fuel shortage and there isn't a crisis. People on the ground are saying something different. Now, what I want to bring up, well, let's hit on this real quick because this was actually, I thought it was pretty funny. The hackers themselves have made a statement, sort of an apology. Our goal is to make money and not create problems for society, DarkSide wrote on a website. So they're basically apologizing for the attack, and they're trying to show they have some scruples or principles. Hey, oops, our bad. We didn't mean to affect this much of society. We just want to get paid. But oh well, I just thought it was kind of interesting. But when we talk about the actual problem with the fuel shortage, I think it goes a little bit deeper because back in April, there were some people already talking about, because of COVID and everything else that was going on, and truck driving schools had started, some had shut down. Experienced drivers with the tanker and hazmat endorsement, which is what you need to move petroleum products, had retired. So there's a shortage of drivers, which, and this is in April, which was going to lead to issues in the summertime with fuel shortages. So if we were already talking about it then, what's the truth? And the only thing I'm saying to the administration is, if a lack of truck drivers on top of the cyber attack is what caused this, and just be honest about it. Don't lie to us about what's going on. We already went through that with COVID when Dr. Fauci said we didn't need masks for the first 2 weeks. That's the only thing I'm asking government to do is be honest. You make a mistake, be honest about your mistake. Everybody makes mistakes. Although the shortage of fuel added to the rising fuel costs, which we were already seeing, leads us into the discussion on inflation. Now, the easiest way to sum up inflation for those that are not economic nerds like I am is the cost of goods go up because the government has spent so much money that the dollar is not worth what it used to be. Wages stagnant. So that now you have people trying to buy more, trying to buy things that cost more with the same amount of money. And the example I would give you is a carton of eggs. 6 months ago, a carton of eggs cost you $1. Well, now when you go grocery shopping, the same carton of eggs costs $1.25, but you still only make this much. You haven't gotten a raise. And a year from now, that carton of eggs costs $1.75, and yet you're still making $17 an hour. The same thing you were before the cost started going up. And the example I give you in this article in the Washington Post, significant price increases have affected used car, medical care, appliances, energy, food. I'm not worried about cigarettes in recent months, according to government data. Gas prices headed higher on Monday. Well, that's if you're not in the East Coast, you can still get gas. You just pay more for it. Before ending the day almost unchanged. Now, I gave the example of the carton of eggs because it's really a simplified example, and I told you a couple of months ago to start tracking what you're paying and how much these costs are going up. Because the problem with inflation is the cost of everything goes up. It keeps costing more. But businesses cannot afford to pay their employees more because they have to charge more for the products so that they can still stay in business. And Walmart, as a huge corporation with all these stores throughout the world, they will be affected, but not as much, because the goods that don't increase in cost, Walmart could take a, say, 0.5% or 1% price increase across the board on all the line items they have in the store. And that will make up for the difference. And if we do the minimum wage increase that people are fighting for, they can plan for that by using the same method. The problem with that is, take Starbucks, for example, because one that's not listed here, but I saw in another report, the cost of coffee has gone up 8% over the last few months. So that's an 8% increase in what it's costing them to purchase coffee that they're known for making. Now you take a barista who makes, say, $11 an hour. Well, if you raise that barista's minimum wage to $15 an hour, you also have to raise the assistant manager and the manager's wage. Or why would they stay if a barista makes the same thing they do, but they have the responsibility? So it's a 5% overall increase in the cost of salaries. So now, in the last few months, if the $15 minimum wage goes through, Starbucks is now, their cost have increased 15% just to keep the doors open. Well, how much is that going to increase the price of my cold brew? Because I'm only going to pay so much for something I can make at home. I'm just lazy and I like the taste of their coffee, so I'll go there. But when the cost becomes prohibitive, I'll just make it at home. Now, if you take that down to the corner store or a bodega, they can't afford to raise the cost like Walmart can and keep employees or stay open. In fact, initially, they'll probably be able to make a choice about, well, I can keep my employees, but I can't give them a raise. Or I have to let half my employees go. I'll give this half a raise, plus this stuff costs more. So I've got to raise prices. So I start driving off customers to Walmart. But that's okay, because that's why we elected the most corporate president in the history of America. I am talking about you, Joe, and Kamala, and all these other Democrats that, for all their complaints about corporations, they have no problem taking their money. They have no problem passing policies and legislation to benefit them to the detriment of small business and the average American, which is what's really going on. Because this inflation is a result of the 2008 bailout, the 1.9 trillion for COVID relief, the second 1.9 trillion for COVID relief, the 1.9 trillion for infrastructure, where less than a quarter of it goes to infrastructure. And of that quarter, as you can see what just happened with the ransomware attack on a Colonial Pipeline, there's even less benefit to the American people. Let's move on to the last item, and then we'll that's right, Jen Psaki, I'm looking at you. I'm going to circle back and we'll talk about it some more. Okay, so the Trump administration came to an agreement with the Taliban and the Afghan government that by May, all coalition troops would be pulled out of Afghanistan. Now, I don't know for sure that coalition countries were part of the negotiation or signed off on it themselves, but the majority of their logistics, transportation, support, and things like this come from the United States. So if the United States pulls all the troops out, then that kind of puts these coalition forces, which have been there from the start, many of them, in a position where they cannot support themselves, so they will pull out as well. So the original agreement was by May, all coalition forces would have been out of Afghanistan. Well, Joe Biden gets elected, the Biden administration comes in. Well, wait, we're going to make it September 11th when we get where we have everybody pulled out by. Now, the curious part for me is, and this is not a conspiracy in any way, shape, or form. This is a matter of understanding Afghanistan, serving in Afghanistan, knowing the history of Afghanistan, that we're leaving our soldiers there for an entire another fighting season, because Afghanistan is a very rugged, mountainous country. There is a lot of snow and the passes get closed in the wintertime. So the fighting season from basically late April to mid to late September, that is when the fighting season happens. So instead of pulling our troops out in May or by May, which was the original agreement, we're going to leave them there for an entire another fighting season, which, if enough incidents happen, give the Biden administration cause to leave them there even longer. So what I will say is, any casualties, those are on the head of this current administration. Like it, don't like it, agree, disagree, but that's where we're at with this. The Taliban have said, they were saying in April, if the troops are not withdrawn by May, they're going to increase attacks. So it's not a matter of them trying to attack as we're trying to withdraw. It's a matter of, there was an agreement made between the United States of America and the Taliban, which, I hate to break it to everybody, the Taliban is not a terrorist group. The Taliban was a political party which led Afghanistan. Yes, they had ties to Al Qaeda, but they were not a terrorist group. They were a political party that controlled the government. An agreement was made. The Biden administration came in and they broke that agreement. So with them breaking that agreement as a Taliban, as you can see right here, explosion caused by car bomb and mortars outside school in Afghanistan, capital of Kabul. I was trying to find a few more, and most of the attacks have not been focused on coalition forces. They've been focused on Afghan civilians. But this goes in line with what Taliban spokespersons have said, that they're going to ramp up attacks because we failed in our agreement and we did not follow through with our agreement to leave. So with what happens, Uncle Joe, this is 100% on you. This is on your conscience, on your hands. And what I'm trying to figure out my entire life until maybe the last 6 years, the Democratic Party, the progressives, the liberals, they have been anti-war. They've been anti-combat. They complained about Reagan sending troops to Lebanon. They complained about Panama. They were all for Afghanistan and Iraq when it started. Then suddenly they want to pull people out. Then when the Trump administration started negotiations to get people pulled out, well, no, we can't do that. We have to stay. We have to stay for this reason. We have to stay for that reason. When did they become the party of the war hawks? And I'm saying this as a retired soldier, and I'm not against war. I'm not a peacenik. I'm for just war. I'm for a rational reason if we're going to put our troops in harm's way. And I am also for sticking to the agreements that we make. I am not for extending their time for an entire another fighting season just so we can see what's going to happen. So I saw this meme on Babylon B, which I thought was funny because I added to it, but it was President Biden loves the fuel crisis because it distracts from the immigration crisis, the inflation crisis. And I added Afghanistan to it. Because this is the fuel thing it's terrible, but it's nowhere near as long term as the effects on immigration or inflation in our country, because inflation is not something to be fixed overnight. Printing money is how we end up going into inflation. So the fix for that is stop printing money. Stop printing money. Stop giving extra unemployment benefits. Your jobs numbers were freaking horrible. Less than a quarter of the people expected entered employment last month. They expected over 1 million. The final number was right around 266,000. Why? Because these service industry jobs that may not be the best and people may complain about them and say people are getting taken advantage of. Well, guess what? Those are needed. And when you have restaurants and convenience stores that cannot open, if you have construction companies that can't bring in laborers because they're making more on unemployment than they would make by going to work, guess what that does to our economy? It creates a vicious cycle of we have to print more money to keep these people stable. And that's just not the right answer. The state of Missouri has said that COVID-related unemployment benefits were going to end soon because the unemployment rate keeps dropping in the state of Missouri. I can't go anywhere without seeing signs saying that they're hiring. And that's from everything from entry-level service positions at minimum wage to median level positions where you start to get into management. We got to get people going back to work. We have to get schools opened, because you can say what you want. You know what? I'm so sick of teachers unions, because I don't even think teachers unions accurately reflect and represent teachers. Because I think if teachers were given a decision, many of them would be back in school based on what they know about the brain formation, or I guess that's the way to say it, but the way that children think and learn. And as an adult, yes, you can do online learning. Maybe even high school level, you can do online learning and it can be effective. But to a certain point, a 5, 6, 7-year-old is not going to get the same out of online learning as they get from being in a classroom with other children and a teacher standing in front of them teaching them stuff. We're creating a dynamic in our country between inflation, the COVID lockdowns, and everything else that's going on that's going to affect our country for the next 25 years, if not longer. And I will tell you this, where I sit at just over 100 days in, this administration has accomplished almost nothing. Yes, they take credit for COVID vaccines. Well, guess what? That was announced before you ever took office. Distribution, well, you know what? Trying to come up with a distribution network for something that big, that fast. Yes, guess what? Your initial plan, it's kind of like Mike Tyson said, no plan survives getting punched in the mouth. So when that initial plan didn't work great and you have to go back and adjust it, that's normal for anything that you're talking about of this scope. Immigration, there has been no move for reform. All you did was increase the number of refugees you're going to let in, which tells me our feckless legislators are doing the same thing they always do. And our feckless president and vice president are doing absolutely nothing. The vice president walked out of a meeting with the president of Mexico and said she had something better to do. She's supposed to be in charge of the border. What's more important than that? So there's been no moves on immigration whatsoever. We have the gas crisis or not crisis, depending on who you listen to. If you listen to people on the ground sitting in line, it's a crisis. If you listen to the government, oh, it's no problem at all. It'll be fixed in no time. You have fighting ramping up in the Middle East again between Israel and Hamas. You have inflation coming, which will lead to a recession. I remember certain aspects of the Carter administration because I was pretty young. I remember once sitting in a line for gas. I remember listening to adults talk about it. I remember some from the news. And from a historical aspect, I can go back and read about it and everything else. But honestly, at this point, at just over 100 days in, this administration has already become more useless than the Carter administration did in 4 years. They've accomplished less in more time than anybody I can think of. So come 2022, if there's incumbents in there, vote them out. In 2024, I don't care who you vote for, just vote for somebody different than what's there. And let's actually affect some change in this country. And if you're wondering how to do it, here's your first step. Register to vote and then go vote. You can also do the same thing I did when I got frustrated and people around me recommended it. And I started looking at some of the other stuff. That's why I started this channel. Because I was told I can explain some of this stuff in a way that people that never really understood it before, maybe they'll get a better understanding. You can do the same thing. Grow your social media footprint. Say what you have to say. Don't fear what negative people will say about you. I've been called everything from a right nationalist to a liberal bleep, and I'm neither one. I'm just honest, and I'm down the middle. I believe in a lot of reform because we got problems. I believe our current administration, our Congress is feckless, and they're going to do nothing. What they remind me of, what the current administration reminds me of, if anybody's a fan of Family Guy, when Peter thinks he's a genius and he watches, I don't remember what the news show is, but then he spends the rest of the episode quoting, "That's shallow and pedantic." That's what I see our administration doing now, from the president to the vice president to their spokespeople. There are no answers. They're not giving any answers. I'm still trying to figure out if we're going to build back better or build back better. And that is horrible grammar, Joe. I just want to throw that out there. Ladies and gentlemen, have a good evening. Please like, share, subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comments. It really does help in the algorithms. I've started doing a daily shorts. The first one was kind of funny and I didn't fix it on purpose because I had the camera turned the wrong way, but I'm going to continue those. For channel members, I'm going to start doing a daily video, just some of my thoughts and what's going on. It'll be more short form. There'll probably be a different type of language because I'll be in the middle of doing stuff while I'm filming the videos and I'll be thinking through stuff. And I want you guys to be a part of, I would like the people that join. Let me take that last comment away. I would like the people that join to have more of a vote in what direction the channel goes and what I talk about. So if you do want to support me, join, go to Patreon, because those same videos will be posted on there so you can get them either way. I'm working on a website. I'm working on some other improvements. Friday, I'm going to do a kind of just funny, relaxed video about my time in Korea and Germany. Nope, nothing that I can be convicted of later on, and nothing that is sexual in nature will be discussed on there. So it'll be semi-family friendly. Probably PG-13 is the best way to put it. But with that, everybody have a good evening, and I'll talk to you later.